And yours is on your seat.
Oh, yeah. That's fine, just in case, yeah. I mean, you'll probably be okay without it. Yeah, that's true for the... All right, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Wanda Coleman Theater. My name is Quentin Ring. I am Beyond Baroque's executive director. This is the opening of the Place Vendôme, the exhibition from Vincent Johnson. We're very excited to be hosting it. We're going to have a wonderful talk with Nizan Shaked as well as Renée Petropolous in just a moment. But before we get started, I did want to say a few words about Beyond Baroque. We are Los Angeles' oldest literary institution, founded in 1968, which makes us 56 years old this year. Yes, I can't claim credit for all of that, but I've been here for a few years now. But we exist to support writers and to nurture new writing. We do that in a variety of ways. We have writing workshops, principally our Monday night fiction workshop and our Wednesday night poetry workshop, the latter of which has been running continuously since 1969. We also have individual master classes that we run on weekends. We have one coming up on the eco-poetics of deep matter, I think it's what it's called, which is sort of a workshop that integrates sort of study of plants in our garden with poetics. That's coming up in a couple weeks. And we have reading and performances right here every weekend in this theater. Just later on this evening, we have Diana Coy Gwen, Tainam Brambrick, and Cindy Ju Young Ok. Diana is launching her new book. We have readings pretty much, as I said, every weekend, so please do check out what we have coming up. But we also have an art gallery, the Mike Kelly Gallery. We show about 6 to 8 shows a year here, and it's a tremendous honor to be welcoming Vincent into the space. We've been working with him for quite a few months now on this exhibit, and with Renee as well. And so I'm just very grateful to both of them for putting this together. A couple words of thanks as well. I should thank our staff for everything they've done to make this exhibit and this program happen. Eric Alberg in the booth, Jimmy Vega, Yvonne Salinas, Genesis Perez, they keep things running. And a special big thanks to our members who support us. This exhibit is very much about the material underpinnings of the art world. That's something I'm very cognizant of. We're very grateful to be supported by our community and our members. So if you are a member of Beyond Baroque, thank you. If you're not, please do consider becoming a member. It costs as little as $60. It keeps events like this free, keeps us open to the public, and it supports everything we do. You can see Genesis in the bookstore about that. You can do it online. It's a huge support to the community. So thank you if you become a member or if you already are one. So I think that's a bit for the rundown of Beyond Baroque. Just to go ahead and move into the program now. As I said, this is an exhibit that's very much concerned with the material underpinnings of the art world, with the origins of the art world, the modern art world anyways, in France in the late 17th and early 18th centuries. And I think very much, it's a study of the material basis of both the intellectual and aesthetic and, the physical infrastructure of what has been bequeathed to us as art. And that's something that's very much on my mind every day when I run this space. Certainly, as I said, we think a lot about money in a space like this, but we also think about the world that we inhabit, what comes to us as art and what comes to us as received ideas about aesthetics and the relationship to politics. And it's a very great honor to be having Vincent here because he's done a huge amount of original research into the deep ties between the slave trade and the art world, both in France, but as I think he'll probably explain, in the United States as well. And you can see that represented in the exhibition. So to get into the program, Renee is going to be moderating. As I said, we have Vincent and Nizan here for conversation. Just to tell you a little bit about each of them. Vincent Johnson is an artist and writer based in Los Angeles. His photographic works and painting engage both significant and neglected historical subjects and are based on intensive research. He receives his MFA from Art Center College of Design in 1997. He has exhibited widely, including PS1 Museum, the SK Stiftung in Cologne, Santa Monica Museum of Art, the Studio Museum in Harlem, and LAX Art. Johnson has received important thematic analysis both through writing and photography of North American cities. His in-depth study of urban transportation and erasure has expanded into other areas of his creative practice, whether it is research, cultural review, or documentation of media and its relationship to history and culture. He is currently photographing Southern domestic and plantation architecture and related cultural artifacts in the Deep South, while doing what he calls the Grand Tour of the Confederacy. He's joined by Nizan Shaked, who is the author of Museums and Wealth, The Politics of Contemporary Art Collections, and The Synthetic Proposition, Conceptualism, and the Political Referent in Contemporary Art. Her article, Museums After Value Form Theory, is forthcoming in the Routledge Companion to Marxism and Art History. Select articles include American Monument, Race and Class in the Oxford Art Journal, Getting to a Baseline on Identity Politics, the Marxist Debate in the Routledge Companion to African American Art History, and Propositions to Politics, Adrian Piper's conceptual work in Adrian Piper, a Reader. We do have many of Nizan's books in the bookstore as well. She is a professor of contemporary art history, museum, and curatorial studies at California State University, Long Beach. Our moderator is Renée Petropolous, who is an artist living in Venice, California. She has shown and performed her work internationally and is a recipient of many awards for her work. She is also part of the Fred Dewey Legacy Project here at Beyond Baroque and elsewhere, a group created to promote the life and work of Fred Dewey. Most recently, she has performed at the Broad Museum and the Wendy Museum, continuing with her project Among Nations, mostly. Huge thank you in particular to Renée for organizing this and for Vincent for the incredible work, as well as to Nizan for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Renée. Thank you all for being here.
I too want to thank everyone for being here, and especially for Nizan and Vincent to engage in this conversation, which we've been having all week and are now presenting to you all. So I'm going to open it with the idea, can each of you speak briefly on the impetus for your projects? What did you notice first that initiated your pursuits? And since both of you are, I think, investigating and doing research on structures and their interconnectedness, something I imagine sparked that. And Vincent, I'm going to start with you. How did you choose the images that you ultimately used in your collages? I guess you could speak first about how you started the work, and then get to that.
The work started, I was researching. I was researching painting materials, and specifically resins, things of that nature. So I wanted to start doing a painting project. This is almost 20 years ago. And I went online onto a website that had a Grumbacher product that was a synthetic synthetic copal resin. And they had there's a short video that described why this product exists and how to use it. So I watched the video. It's a couple minutes long, and toward the end of it, it veered off to explain why it was no longer why this synthetic resin existed in any instance, and the reason why is because basically the savages in the Congo are keeping the West from getting access to this copal. So from that, I realized that in concert with some things I had read while I was in graduate school in Pasadena regarding specifically Hegel's philosophy of history, where he somehow is able to not acknowledge any the existence of human achievement by Africans, that set some things in place. And I actually, part of my thesis on it, and it wasn't the preponderance of it, but part of it, in '97 was I burned 3 books in my backyard in our house, and one of them was Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, because he said the same thing, but much earlier, and then Hegel said what he had to say, and so I set them on fire, and turned them into photo collages. And how I did that is I randomly held the camera over the burning things, and then I just sequenced them as they came out, and that was part of my show. So a lot of people were disturbed by them because they said, "Is book burning?" I said, "Really, it is." But I said, "But why?" So that didn't go anywhere, but God Almighty, almost 15 years, so it was about 2014. I went to the first Black Artists Retreat in Chicago, the Astor Gates Retreat, and I presented the research I had at that time, which was minimal because I wasn't able to find anything. So I did a talk on Belgian Congo copal, and what I had found out about that Belgium had gone into the Congo and killed about half of the citizens in that nation, and that it used the raw materials it acquired, whether it be from ivory to gold to Congo wood to every material. That material ended up being used to create Art Nouveau. So that set off my project like nobody's business. I still wasn't able to get anywhere, and I actually thought that I would have to retire from my employment to be able to go to the Getty and have a reader's card and then do research. And instead what happened is I found that in the last, say, 10 years, the Getty and Microsoft and Harvard, et cetera, have been scanning their books. And oh my God, a portal opened to knowledge that I never had access to.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Nizan, also, how did you begin, especially the project that I think relates so much to Vincent's, is the museums and well. How did you initiate that, and how did you make the decision on which case studies, which institutions to examine?
So, do I have to press? If I press, it
sounds
works?
all right,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, thank you. So, I mean, I guess, yeah, I'm presuming I'm here because, like, Vincent's work is creating this kind of image of how empire functions and the kind of overlapping systems and what appears where it comes from. And I think that, you know, there's in Karl Polanyi and his book The Great Transformation, which looks at hundreds of years of how capitalism came to be, there's this one quote that I think really struck me and became very significant. He talks about the emergence of extreme poverty in the various, like in Britain, and especially in England in the 17th century, and the ways in which people that observe the phenomenon have no idea where it came from, because the origins of it are so deep and they're elsewhere, that you have that, and they don't have that larger picture, and then you have this emergent phenomenon, and then it's dealt with in that moment from the resources that they have. And that always struck me, and that there's so many things and so many conditions with which we are dealing where we do not have the capacity to understand their origins, and therefore how to actually treat them and undo them. So I think that, you know, one of the stories that is being told here with Vincent's work is this kind of very complicated system, but then that it ends with how discrimination functions in the present, how erasure functions in the present, but its origins are really deeply buried. So it's the way that this happened is that when I did my PhD, I did an exam on museum history. And then I taught museum history for 10 years without ever writing about it at all. I was just teaching and reading and observing and teaching. And that's when the bigger patterns began to emerge. And I think that, you know, and then there was this moment of like, you know, who am I to be seeing the larger pattern? Is the larger pattern that I'm seeing valid? And I thought to myself, well, if Francière can do it, why can't I? Why is it illegitimate for me to be seeing these, like, because the magnitude of what I saw, that essentially, like, some of the wealth structures that are funding art now are basically kind of medieval in their character. And then they repeat that, and where does that come from, and what kind of transformations And, you know, like literally what kind of transformation has the law gone through that allows a structure to function like this in administratively in the present?
Well, what's interesting, I think, for in both of your situations, to me, is that you've both chosen the art world to demonstrate sort of larger patterns.
It works the other way around, right? I'm already in the art world, and
Yes,
that's when
yes.
and that's when I begin to see the larger patterns. So it's not so much that. So yeah, I mean, my book is a book about museums, but you can look at it as a book about the nonprofit system, its origins, you know, in the British legal system. And so that's the kind of world system which is of course connected to empire and connected to other empires that also feed into it. But yeah, it's not, so if you can read my book and use it to understand the nonprofit system, but I got to that because I'm interested in the art nonprofit system.
Right.
So then the larger picture comes because, but yeah, art is a conduit to larger picture studies if we would allow ourselves to do that. And I think I'm going to say this and maybe we can develop it later, that one of the things that I'm seeing in your work is when I'm looking at your work and you keep saying like, aha, and like, why didn't we know about this? Or how does this emerge now? And the fact, like, there are reasons why this information is suppressed. And then there's a way in which the disciplines of knowledge function, and where do those disciplines come from? What are their subject matter? What are their methods? And if you just look at that, then you can see everything that they're hiding and why.
Do you both of you maybe could comment on if you think it's really hiding it or not allowing it to be foregrounded? I think they're slightly different, right?
I think it's
Suppressed
like just
or
going up the
repressed?
stairs. You know the stairs are there. Okay, somebody built the stairs, or you had the stairs built, and that was purposeful, right?
Yes.
So that you could go to the next landing, right? So these economic systems, slave trade, etc., that's the stairs. That's to get you where you want to go, right? And on your own, you would not be able to do that because you can't earn as much as 6,000 people who are not being paid any money can earn.
Right.
So unless you're Uber, but that's separate. But anyway, that's it.
Well, back to my initial question, I still, maybe you could both articulate on how you choose the particular images. Like the collages upstairs are generated by your research.
Right.
But you've made very particular choices, and maybe you could elaborate on
Okay,
that.
well, I wanted to, there was like 3 elements I would say that I wanted to make sure that was present, but not because I'm already saying, and that it's a given that the wealth was generated from the slave trade. So I'm not going to show you 1,000 pictures of the slave trade. There's no reason to do that. But I'm going to hint at it through like having a ship in the background. That's it, right? But so then what I want you to see, which is what you don't experience when you go to any institution, any museum, history museum or otherwise, you don't see the day-to-day of how this thing came to the world and how it functions. So you don't go into the Africans in American Museum in Washington D.C. and see the daily administration of the slave trade in action, the way you do with the daily administration of the British Empire running North America in Williamsburg. Okay, so that's for me what people on the East Coast call interpretations, right? And so that's one of the things I would like to see to happen, is that because that's why I did what I call a grand tour of the Confederacy, because when I went across the United States with my daughter, the Southeast, we went to various significant historical locations, and so when we went to the one in just to talk about this one briefly, in Alabama, is a plantation we actually went to twice. The first time it was closed. The second time it was open. We had tickets. We got in and we heard the speech. And this is the most significant architectural structure in Alabama. It's taught to the University of Alabama architecture students. The students are brought to the grade school students are brought to it as if it's some kind of religious artifact of the importance of the state of Alabama. Okay, and I saw that replayed over and over, and so by seeing that. So, like same thing when you go outside of Charleston, and there's the Middleton plantation, where inside is Arthur Middleton's portrait, and this is a person who signed the Declaration of Independence. His portrait should not be in that, but what's instead is there is a blown up building by the Union forces, and then one of his outbuildings, and then one of his buildings where he lived. And it says, and why is this? What is so? This is this perpetual. That's the perpetuation of mythology, of course, of the South, right? And of not just denial, but a refusal. What's the difference between denial and refusal? Okay, so that is somewhere in that category of disavowing the reality of what took place. Okay, and wanting to maintain that. And that's what, like I said, so by doing this project, what I became keenly aware of is that Paris is exactly that, okay? That it has perpetrated these acts over centuries to disparate individuals and communities and nations. And there's a video online where one of the presidents prior to Macron is asked about, what about what you guys did to Haiti? You decimated it. Credit Foncier sucked the life of it out of it, et cetera, et cetera. And he said Haiti is cursed.
Blame it on it.
Yeah, it's this a demon in outer space that caused it to happen.
It was the demon in outer space. Mm-hmm. So how do you chose particular institutions?
Yeah.
What characteristics did they have that made you go to them, like SF MoMA or particular places?
So SF MoMA is my big case study, and I start with it. It was my interest was in the question of, are these institutions public? And because they claim that they're public in everything that suits them. So publicity, grant writing, when they have a public face and then they claim that they're public, but the minute you want any type of information, then they turn around and then they claim they're private because they're both. So you have the kind of jewel box museums that certainly, so I didn't want to ask these questions around an institution like the Broad, because it has, maybe we can say like, okay, it's a namesake museum and it has more of a private dimension. So the SF MoMA presented, the LACMA would be a really interesting case, I think. But what happened was that at the time when I was writing, the SF MoMA was, they were redoing the building, and then they were borrowing the Fisher collection. And the Fisher collection was amassed by the proprietors of the Gap. So it was just happening at that time. And so I started to look at this, and I was really interested in this idea where they're like the relationship with a philanthropist is of borrowing the collection and not of buying it. So to look at what does that do in terms of the value of art, and how does the value of art function as a system? Where does it come from historically? How is it administered? And so that was the impetus to look at that case study, because it was a city museum that was nevertheless private, and then had this private interaction and had this big building
which has become
project.
Standard now in the United States, at least.
That kind of structure,
Okay.
That's always, they standardize it at a certain point, but it's very malleable, and the laws change around it. So that was the reason that I wanted to look at that. And then the MoMA, I think the MoMA, because it was kind of a parent institution in the United States, in terms of that structure, the hybrid private-public nonprofit, and the MoMA, of course, because of its significance in general in setting up
Especially modern
the
art.
modernism, the narrative of modernism. And for me, like one of the chapters, it's called From Medici to MoMA. And so, and I looked at a very particular moment in the history of Medici collecting, because Francesco de' Medici, who's a lesser known Medici, he's not Lorenzo or Cosimo, right? But he was the one who moved the collections. He built a studiolo, so a kind of a configuration of a cabinet for himself. Vasari builds it in the Palazzo Vecchio, and in 5 years he dismantles it and moves it to the Uffizi, and essentially he's the one that makes the Uffizi semi-public. And that structure of the Uffizi being semi-public is really becomes the model for Europe starting to to realize that they need these kinds of outward-facing collections. So I call that moment, he's a model for a transition that took place all over Europe that I call the externalization of collections, before which painting didn't have the type of value that it had after it begins to be collected and it's part of a unit. So really to understand how value functions as a system and how collecting is essential to that system outside of patronage, because the history of the Renaissance is usually told as the history of patronage. And that's where, like, in doing all this work, that's where I encountered two kind of side disciplines to art history. One is the history of collecting and collections. The other is the history of the art market. And that's what I keep seeing in your work.
I see that in your work as well. And I
Because
think that's the strong
those are the
connection.
disciplines whose methodologies and focuses create that kind of tunnel where things can be basically actively like suppressed or unconsciously repressed. The histories get hidden because of the ways that these disciplines, what they foreground, what they are looking for in the archive, what they put together, and then what becomes knowledge. And in that system, the kind of all the blood and all the suppression and extreme oppression and the cruelty they all get hidden, because these are not the questions that get asked.
Well, I mean, to bring both of your projects, the historical aspect to the present day as well, is even though they're in different centuries and some of it overlaps, I think, I mean, in terms of background, but art collecting is subsidized by really similar people, right? And we could speak about that today. Right on our streets or in our universities, we're all seeing something unfolding in terms of patronage, right? And who's on boards, et cetera, et cetera. Can you both comment on that and how you might see moving into the future with that? I mean, maybe that's too big of a question, but if you could comment on how art collecting is subsidized by these various businesses or practices.
When the preview show at SFOMA for the new building, right? I went up there, and they're the dad, the mom and dad own the Gap, right? And so the dad, right, the dad's in this video in a corner. Someone asked him about his eye. How do you pick work, right? And he said, well, I go to the top 5 galleries in the world, and that's where I got to work. That's my eye. Okay? So with that in mind, okay, reality, smack in the face again, right? And that's it. There's documentaries that show art collectors that live on first 10 floors of a condo tower in New York, and the camera crew goes up to each floor, and the door is open to that condo, and the identical artist's work, not the same, like they say there's a rectangle that's say 2 by 3 feet, right? It's that artist on every floor for 10 floors when you open the door. So then, what does that leave? any kind of aesthetic decision making regarding a collector. It's non-existent. Okay, as if, again, last one. I'm at Shaman Reed in New York, right? And two people came in and they asked. They say, "I want a Bryce Martin." And I said, like, wait, what do you mean you want a Bryce Martin? And they said, we want a Bryce Martin. And so why? What is your interest in Bryce Martin? We want a Bryce Martin. That's okay. So that's the end of it. I have the means to have this as a register of my power. Okay, right? That's it. Yes, I'm sure. Have we not forgotten what what he did with his initial collection? How those artists were blown out of his collection, and then the real artists appeared. So there we go.
That's an old history, though.
That's right. That's right.
Using art to show your status.
That's right.
Or
Exactly.
power in that way.
Right, and not being knowledgeable about it at all, and then not being meaningful. I mean, this is counter to, say, the German art collector that owns like K21 or something like that, where the people have PhDs in art history themselves that own like a chocolate factory in Germany. So that's completely different. This person is using it only for status, and I think that's the standard pretty much. So so the things they're parallel universes: actual serious people and actually ignorant people. So.
Would you say this is a component of the collecting impulse of Pierre Crozat? Is that what? Okay,
well, he surrounded himself by the premier intellects of his time in the art world. So he didn't, he became an amateur, as it was called, because of him having the pills and the others around him, and so that's why he was able to. Because when he would go to Italy, he had a short list. Get this, get that, get this, get that, right?
That's not dissimilar than the story you just told us?
That's right, it's the same thing, exactly. Somebody told him what to do, and he did it.
Right, okay.
Exactly. He trusted them.
I think you're both talking about that in many ways in terms of your investigations. I think when you write about it, you can chronicle it, and I think in your, obviously, the timeline or the archive, we can see how you were thinking, right?
Yes.
But at a certain juncture, you turn them into something.
That's right, exactly.
And how does that transformation happen or work? Like, how do you make that aesthetic proposition?
The research actually generates the work, and it's as though I'm envisioning the whole collage, because I've been on collage for quite a while. And I can see them. But not just see them. I can go in Photoshop and go put this next with this and next with this, and start building the thing out and go, okay, this is working. And there's some really interesting things that are happening visually, right? It's so, because I've done the number of years I've used that, at least 20 years that I've done some type of collage, but not any that actually, only one where I did the ones on the atomic bomb and all the related images of that. So I did that that was at Stephen Hull's space on La Cienega in 2011, I think.
I see.
So that was the but I didn't have the knowledge base to do what I have now. I couldn't say that I sensed it, but I was convinced that I was going to know what I became to know, because I kept seeing these little hints of it. I was buying art magazines from like 1900 and somebody would say it like just one line and go, oh my God, just pay attention, just keep paying attention. And lo and behold, the portal to knowledge opened up, the door swung wide and clear, and shame on them, because they never planned on me knowing what I know. I put it that way, or for me letting it out.
But do you think that they were like aware they were trying to hide the fact that they're building like an art trading business on top of was it a cover up for the slave trading business, or was it like there was no distinction, like in that image where it's like, oh, estate sale, like people for sale, paintings for sale?
I think they weren't oblivious, but because it was That was the actual society. It's as unbelievable as it is. Okay, so like I've said, Walmart, Slave Mart. That's literally there's no difference. Okay, when you could go instead of buying now you can buy a machine gun. Well, then you could buy a Negro. But then you could buy a shotgun and a Negro. Okay, that's the difference. Okay, so now you can't do one of them. That's the difference. That's it. There's no separation. There's no it's like psychological phenomenon that's taking place that's where somebody makes a decision or that is based on religion or some belief system.
Yeah.
It's that if I have 5,000 people working for me for free for 300 years, I will be unbelievably rich. And that's the end of it. You don't. There's no calculus required. You don't need a spreadsheet. You don't need anything. You know that you're going to. Even if each one of them is only making you $5 a day, well, okay, there we have it, right? So, so that's what to me the phenomenon of that is that the people I came from was able to throw that off without weapons, okay, without identical weapons, which is astounding. So. One of the things I've learned from my research is that if you look at the images from Civil War, from what's the name of the photographer who was going around that had the big studio in New York, they were taking photographs of, he got the contract to photograph the Civil War. If you look at those images, and I have lots of them because they're on the Library of Congress, I have a whole archive on the images that are from the slave trade that are photographs from these handful of art photographers, what we call art photographers. And what you see on the street right now, if you took those photographs and you looked into a homeless encampment, they are identical. Those people the people now are suffering at the same level with the same level of deprivation. They're not part of society. They're not human. They're not even garbage. That's what, and so what the phenomenon to me is the experience. The thing is that the United States empire has been able to successfully recreate the phenomenon without having the phenomenon present.
Right. Yeah. Well, but I mean, it is present, I think, and people are talking about it. So I mean, I'm just thinking. Even we brought up Alexander's work on the new Jim Crow, for example. So the system is recreated, but in a different manner, or there's a kind of translation. So it moves from slavery to forms of labor and then prison labor,
Right.
and
in this country, it moved to it is presently prison labor.
But
it's something like 7.9 billion.
But I think that one of the questions I think that your work is evoking, and that I think maybe you're trying to get to is because we do, and we've talked about this, your theory of everything, and then how everything creates the present. What do we do? Like, there is a tendency of the archive of everything that's there to disappear in this multitude. Mm-hmm. And then what is your procedure that allows certain things to emerge for you to be able to make the connection to tell a larger story?
I think that is because I'm also a storyteller, and that so that I am actually creating a story without sometimes being aware of it, highly unaware of it, sometimes being partially unaware of it, sometimes being completely aware of it. And in the instance of when I started doing a project, the first thing I was working on in Belgium, I had no idea about Paris. Then I did New York,